This episode is brought to you by Self-Care. Tell me, people, when are you going to be through with tolerating bad service? Whether it's restaurants or auto shops or lawn guys, it's like everyone has forgotten how to give 100%. Your family says they appreciate you and love you. Do they really? Do they really do it enough? As much as you would in their place? Isn't there a provider who cares about your well-being as much as you do? They say that if you want something done right, you'll do it yourself. Well, do you know who gets that like you do? No one. Until now. Introducing Self-Care, the full service that handles everything just as you want it. Because they are the first service company completely staffed by the only people who seem capable of doing anything right anymore these days. You. Just open your account for only $99.99 per month at Self-Care and tell them what you need doing. For example, a complete dinner and rooms for your arriving family. Carefully detail, in the app, each task that needs to be done. Then Self-Care will step in. They'll issue instructions to you via text to clean the apartment, buy the ingredients, cook the meal, wash the bed linens, and set the table. Next thing you know, it's all done, just as it should be. No notes. Go to the Self-Care app and give 5 stars and a tip. No more struggling with knuckleheads begging for more time or trying to cut corners. And use the promo code REREAD, one word, to have Self-Care send you last-minute changes to your tasks at no extra charge. And thank you, Self-Care, for sponsoring the Rereading Wolf podcast. This episode is brought to you by the support of generous listeners just like you. You can learn how to be one of them at patreon.com/rereadingwolf. And thank you, listener patrons, for supporting the Rereading Wolf podcast.
Warning. The following discussion is deliberately riddled with spoilers and unhinged speculation on this nearly 40-year-old book, Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. You can't read a Gene Wolfe story. You can only reread a Gene Wolfe story.
Welcome to Rereading Wolf. We don't pretend that this is the first time you and we have read these books. We want to understand them in as much detail as possible, and that means considering the works as a whole.
Hi, I'm James Wynn.
And I'm Craig Brewer. We haven't done an author interview in a while, but we have plans to get that, series, I guess, going again. We're going to start with someone, though, whose Wolfe connection comes through, apart from being generally well-read in genre fiction, the actual connection to Wolfe with this author comes through me. Ryan Leslie is a friend of mine, and his 3rd novel is coming out in September. It's called The Garden of Before, and it's a sequel to a book called The Between. And I promise there's some Wolfe content in what's coming up. Okay, but his 2nd novel was actually called Colossus, and I narrated the audiobook for that one. That was my first audiobook gig, so I was really obviously proud of it, and I thought the least that we could do was give Ryan a little publicity and me a little publicity. Why not? I mean, it's half my show, so why not? Thing is, though, all of this happened when James and I were on our sort of unofficial hiatus. And Ryan and I recorded a good long conversation about the book that I narrated, Colossus, and it was spoilerific, or at least we split it in a way that we could do our full spoiler-filled talk about it as well. Not going to do that with this one today, but it's actually a different one today because back when we were on break, I never got that episode out. And it seemed a bit weird to talk about an old book right when he's got a new one coming out. So we decided to record a new talk about his duology and hopefully convince you to go take a look at it. Some of you may have heard of it before, or hopefully even read it, because I do share links to his stuff on social media a lot of the time. And I know some people have commented nicely on that, so that's good. But we've only really mentioned it once or twice on the show. I think I mentioned how much time it was taking me to get things done because work was interrupting and all kinds of stuff. So even though our talk today is not wholly all about Wolfe himself, like many of our other author interviews are, the man with a mustache certainly does come up quite a few times. So I hope you'll take a few minutes to look up Ryan's books. And if you're interested in what we're talking about here, then you can go out and snag The Between right now, just The Between. You will be well prepared then when the sequel, and in my opinion, the real end of the story, even though The Between is a self-contained novel. I think the real story takes the second book. That comes out in a month or so, at least when we're putting this out right now. So September, and we say the date, and it's momentarily, I've forgotten it. But I will say, if you just want to hear my voice for like 14 hours or so, you can go snag Colossus as well on Audible. It's a really smart, really philosophical, honestly, take on all kinds of issues. It is a space opera of a sort as well. Put that in there just to kind of genre classify it. I'll just tease here about that one, about Colossus, that it starts off with a drug called Dying Wish, which it seems to give people the answers to all the questions of life, universe, and everything. Problem is, you die right after you get those answers. And then things get more complicated from that. So for now, though, here's Ryan Leslie and I talking about the Between duology from Parliament House Press. Like I mentioned, I don't know that you would say that Wolfe was a direct inspiration for this book or for your writing. I certainly know you've read a lot of Wolfe.
Right.
And so you've had him. So this book, which is your first book that came out, called The Between. I know it wasn't the first book you wrote, though. Is that right?
Right. First book that I wrote was Colossus, which actually got published second.
Okay. Yeah.
But had a longer road to publication. The Between was a little easier to pitch, let's put it that way. It was one where it had a teaser and people knew exactly what they were getting into, or at least they thought they knew what they were getting into. So
yeah,
easier one to sell.
Yeah. And I was going to say, this seems like an easier book to sort of set up the premise, but the good part about it, though, I think, is that in the long run, the premise, it goes way beyond what the premise sounds like. Right. Like it sounds like something that once you kind of get what the big pieces are, you're like, oh, okay, so it's going to be, a playing out of a certain kind of thing, but it goes in lots of different ways, which I like. So, but why don't you do that? Give me the elevator pitch for the book so that others can hear it too.
Yeah. Well, the concept's pretty straightforward. A guy who kind of lives in a suburban house is landscaping his backyard, and he finds an iron door buried in the soil, and he's kind of freaked out by it. Because it looks like it may lead to something. And so he calls up his childhood buddy, Jay, because he knows this is exactly the type of thing that Jay is going to be interested in. And he invites him over to open it up and explore what's beneath it. And very quickly they get trapped and learn that they found their way into something that resembles kind of a Escher-like kind of dungeon and maze with horror story monsters, and there is some strange connection to an old 1980s text kind of command line based computer game called The Between.
Yeah, and that that's not a spoiler because it is definitely early-ish in the first book, but it's something that you don't know until a little while later.
Right. Well, it's on the back cover of the book, and so
that's right. It does. Yeah. It does say that, doesn't it? Yeah. The cover art too.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily give it away. I think it does a bit more in the second cover, maybe. But if you're looking closely, it looks like at first maybe just some cool way to do it, and then certain of the decisions in the cover art become clearly like 80s video game. Okay,
yeah.
I got it.
Well, if you look closely at the cover, you've got this kind of glitchy skull that's on there, but behind it is kind of green screen text from a CRT computer monitor of like one of those command line games like Zork.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not probably going to immediately jump out to you till you get halfway in the book and you kind of turn back and look at the cover and go, oh, okay, yeah, there's more going on here than it appeared.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. So, was the text that's on there, did you have any input on that, or was it just?
Yeah. So it was interesting. Working with the cover artist at the time, the majority of the design was already done, and I had the idea of putting that behind it. And so we were we were kind of going back and forth. I was trying to help a much younger cover artist understand what I meant by a computer line game, a command line game, green screen, CRT. What would that look like? And so we're on this call, and the text is actually it's from the book. There's a kind of a main screen when the computer game loads up. It's that text. And I had just thrown it into the open source equivalent of Photoshop. And as we're talking, I'm kind of sending versions like, okay, it's something like this. And then I found a filter that was a CRT filter. I found an online font that was a green screen, like from like Apple IIe or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then something that then added kind of the reflective, like if it were a TV monitor or something. And so about 15 minutes, I send this image to her that's like, okay, this is kind of what I mean. And then she's looking at it, she's like, this is perfect. You just made it. So why don't we just use this? Oh, okay. So I despite having no artistic talent whatsoever, I contributed a little bit to that cut.
That's cool. Did she give you a cut of her fee?
Yeah.
No. That's part of the thing I was saying, that when you first kind of get the pieces, you might think, oh, okay, I know where this is going. And once you're like, oh, well, it's like a real version of a video game. So it's going to be about sort of solving the video game or you like beating the game or whatever on its own terms. And it's nice that it doesn't really do that at all. It doesn't just become a sort of playing out of sort of game logic.
Right. Well, for better or for worse. So it is funny because when I wrote this, I think my first version that I had, probably sometime late 2017 or so, the whole lit RPG, Dungeon Crawler Carl stuff, none of that to my knowledge was really out there or kind of a known thing. Mm-hmm. This book came out early 2021, and particularly because I didn't, it has a lot of those elements, but it's not, I wouldn't say, like if you asked, is this a lit RPG book? I would say no. Just like if you asked, is this a horror book? No, it's got elements of those. Of course, now lit RPG is super hot, and if I had really pitched it that way, it might have had more readers than I know. But yeah, no, I had a lot of different things that all kind of came together in the book, and so it like you said, it kind of seems like it's one story, but there's a lot more going on than just, oh, you've become characters in this game, now you've got to play it out. Well, no, that's maybe 10% of it.
Yeah. So, and it is, we should say too, in two parts.
Right.
The first book, though, was it intended to have a sequel?
Yes.
When you first read it? Okay.
Yeah.
Because there is a strong way in which the first book could stand alone.
Well, it was intended to do two different things. When I wrote the first book, I had an overarching story that I didn't know if it was going to take me 2 or 3 or 5 books to tell. I didn't really know what the total scope of it was going to be, but I knew there was a bigger arc that was only kind of hinted at in the first book. First book has its own arc, and I wanted it to stand alone. So I didn't want it to be like, as much as I love Hyperion, you get to the end of Hyperion and it just ends. Mm-hmm. I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted people to feel satisfied with it because I didn't know, this is my first book to get published. I didn't know, would it be 2 years, 10 years? Like, would I ever get back to it? And I also didn't know, would I, write a dozen of these, or would I move on and write, totally other things? So it ended up taking me 2. But the first book can comfortably stand on its own.
Well, just to mention a Wolfe thing, I mean, Book of the New Sun started off as a novella and became, 5+ books. So
yeah.
So yeah, but it's the other thing I would say too, like you mentioned genre, it's the video game thing makes it sound like it could be science fiction.
Yeah.
I know it's sort of cross-listed in places as horror. which Colossus is too, is sort of a mix of sci-fi / horror.
Right.
But I personally, just knowing my own taste, one thing I really appreciated was how strange it is at the beginning in particular. And I think it actually keeps a pretty strong thread of this, where there's some definitely what I would consider more outright weird kinds of things that it's hard to say whether they're what's going on is easy sci-fi, easy fantasy descriptions, at least from the way that the characters experience things. Because one of the coolest first things that you get in there was when they open up the door, which by the way is a real door. It's not like a portal on the hole or something like that. It's a literal door that's just lying flat. And they get down in this little basement room, and at first it's a whole bunch of books, and there are bookshelves everywhere, and they're books that one of the characters seems to really know really well because he's a book collector. But then the awesome thing is he opens up the books and they're all blank on the inside. And that's just this really cool moment of, oh, I was not expecting, it's like, it just creates that great sense of sort of creepy. And there are other things like that go on where you do get this strong sense of kind of weird, uncanny, like a maze that's not any kind of maze that you would imagine.
Oh yeah.
Unless maybe you remember certain kinds of video games from that era in particular.
Right.
But still it's the way it's presented is definitely the characters having to deal with all this sort of stuff without the sense that, oh, okay, there are necessarily rules here that I've got to figure out. And then once I figure them out, then I can beat the bad guy. And it doesn't work that way at all.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's an FAQ, a notebook that the characters end up getting for the computer game that is relevant to what they're actually experiencing. But I think as you read it, you'll see it's anything but a comprehensive list of rules. Mm-hmm. It probably introduces a lot more questions than it provides answers.
Yeah.
I would say the kind of multi-genre aspect of it, the authors that I read that probably resonated the most with me, that I love their stories, and that just made me want to write, were probably Paul Auster, Haruki Murakami did this, Borges did this, and I would say Margaret Atwood for sure. Just where very, very hard to define. There's always a connection with the real world. Mm-hmm. There can be fantastical elements that follow their own rules, but you as the reader may, and certainly the characters don't know what those rules are.
Right.
And that there are elements of horror and romance, and it's kind of all the stuff of real life where it's you're going to get kind of taken through the ringer a lot of different ways. But what they all, in not all of their works, but a lot of them, there's a surreal quality that I love and that I tried to include in this, where you just imagine yourself experiencing this, and it's just weird enough that you just don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And in fact, you mentioned Murakami. I mean, Kafka on the Shore, you get to a certain part on that book and you realize that these characters are doing all these weird, wild things, but there is a certain kind of logic to it. But how the logic adds up still remains surreal. Like exactly how and why is it important that it work this way?
Right.
And it stays odd. And I feel like you do achieve something like that by the end of the whole story.
Thank you. Well,
which is really cool.
Yeah. One big challenge that I had, I was in a writing workshop in 2017 where I had part of the first book done. And one of the, and I think I've got this in the acknowledgments in the back of the first book, because this really was impactful. You go through in those workshops, sometimes they can be great. And this one was great. And one of the fellow writers said, "This is entertaining, but this feels like you're setting up a Lost, like the TV show, the J.J. Abrams TV show Lost, where you've made all of these promises." And what she said is, "And I don't know that I trust you to deliver on these." which I think is the exact right thing to say at that moment, where it's not yet fully written, because then it became a challenge. It was, okay, I loved Lost until toward the end when I felt like, I don't think this is going to all pay off. And I thought in my head, I know how all this resolves. I know what's going on. But then I had to ask myself, do I know it in the level of detail that I need to have the reader, when the whole story is done, feel like, not that every bit of it is understandable, because I like leaving a lot of mystery. I like leaving some things open-ended, but is it satisfactory where it's like, okay, yeah, this all came together. None of this felt just like whims in the moment. This all felt like it was a cohesive story.
Yeah.
And I think it is better because of that challenge, because I put in a lot of extra work so that I could feel like, yeah, you don't trust me. I'm going to make good on that promise.
So that's the premise. The characters. It starts off, and it seems like it's kind of going to be a buddy story too. And in some sense, it is, especially the first book. But it also doesn't quite work out that way from the beginning, because the characters, the two main guys, they get separated and start to have very different experiences of the same place for a whole bunch of different reasons. But it's still the dynamic between the two of them that guides so much going, so much of the first book, and really literally the plot of the first book. Yeah, I was just curious about how that came about, to sort of start off with buddy story that sort of becomes a totally different kind of buddy story.
Well, so I think you have to draw some things from your real life, and my characters really are not. You can't really look at any of them, or at least I can't, and say that's really modeled on this person or not. I take a lot of different things that I think are interesting, and I kind of mash them together until I find what works for the right character and feels real. But some of the circumstances are things that are just like, yeah, this is something, especially you get a little older, you've had childhood friends, maybe you're still in touch with some of them, but things change. You grow, sometimes you get closer as friends, sometimes you start splitting apart. And what I thought was an interesting dynamic is it starts off as a buddy story and a kind of buddy adventure. Two guys who've been friends since childhood that know each other very, very well, but they've started growing apart. And so a fun layer to the story, I say fun, something that hopefully gives it more depth than just, more of kind of the adventure aspect of it, is that everything they're experiencing exposes both their friendship and kind of some of the foundations of it. But it also exposes a whole lot of why they've started growing apart in ways that they haven't really faced. And so that adds a lot of strain and stress. And it, as the story goes on, and this isn't really spoiling anything, it's the whole world of the Between, a lot of it is set up to kind of set these characters up as adversaries. And so having that dynamic with a friend, it's something that is fantastical, but it's also something people can relate to.
Yeah.
This person was my friend. Now I feel like I don't know them, or I feel like that we're not close, or even maybe we don't get along anymore. And so it's got elements of that. And it moves from what seems to start as a buddy story throughout the first book. I mean, there are really two main perspective characters in the first book. There are a couple little slivers from other characters, but it's really primarily those two, the buddies, Paul and Jay. But the second book has perspectives from probably 5 or 6 of the different characters that you've gotten to know pretty well by that point. And so the story becomes bigger than just a buddy story.
Yeah. And that's one thing too. I know we were talking mainly about the first book, but in the second book, you really did open it up to a couple different characters pretty quickly. But the fact that Paul's wife becomes a central character with her own separate arc in many ways.
Oh yeah.
Was one thing I wasn't necessarily, I was expecting more of sort of the two of them. What was the decision to do that? Was that more of a just, there's other perspectives on what the Between is doing?
No, it's a great question. And I mean, I think it's a few different things. One is there's only so much you can do in a book, or at least so much that I was able to do. And I wanted more than anything readers to feel like they really understood Paul and Jay, and that they were pretty well realized, and that neither one of them are just kind of archetype characters. They're you get into Paul and you really start understanding the anxiety and all the challenges that he faces, and how a lot of the things that seem good from the outside, there are a lot of cracks underneath the surface. He's got a great house and he's got a great wife, but there's challenges with that relationship, and those are unresolved. Jay is kind of struggling to fully transition into a responsible adult, but he's not a character that he can seem goofy sometimes, but he's, I wanted him to be almost kind of like this Bill Murray sad clown type character, where you start feeling like there's a lot more going on. This is a really interesting person that's been through a lot more and is using humor to hide a lot of feelings of inadequacy and pain. And so one thing that I was trying to do is, one, develop those characters, but then really show who they are through their relationships with each other and through other characters. And I didn't want those other characters to also just be, I didn't want them to be vehicles for the main characters. They needed to be real in their own right. And so by the time the second book came around, I felt like they were all part of the story, and I had set up enough where I didn't need to keep investing in Paul and Jay, meaning like I didn't need to build them from scratch anymore. I needed to keep them developing, but that work was, that's a lot easier. Now I wanted to take characters that the readers were familiar with and make them more compelling also. And so one fun thing, at least to me, is that all the characters, most of the characters you see in the first book, play a bigger role in the overall story than you would realize just reading the first book. Even ones that are just passing, their role in the story is bigger. And so it was also just a challenge and part of the fun. It's like, you want to write something you enjoy writing. So adding more fun characters it just appealed to me.
Yeah. So you have the people as characters. Once they get into the game world, there are also roles. And it's not quite, race, class, D&D type things. It's more these almost archetypal figures that have a certain function in the quote unquote game world, but that also sort of take over personalities, and a question of how much people's personalities can guide the role that's given there. Maybe we should say a little bit about that, and also why they all have Esperanto names, which is the other fun thing that pops out.
I think you'll see in the first book that there's a fair amount that's in Esperanto, and I'm not going to explain why that is. You read through the end of the second book and you'll know what that is.
I'm curious for you, why did you decide to use Esperanto?
Well, that actually is really easy. In graduate school, one of my classmates was Hungarian.
Oh.
And in primary school, he and his classmates all learned Esperanto because, heavy Russian influence. And they were taught it because it's like, the whole world is going to move to this. And so you'll need to know this, which was, totally ridiculous to him in hindsight. But at the time, they thought that they're just ahead of everyone. And
it was a Hungarian who, quote unquote, invented Esperanto.
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah. Okay. And well, the other thing too that made it particularly memorable, that in itself, I thought was funny. But right around that exact same time, I read an article about how there was this rumored William Shatner movie that was done it was black and white. It was before Star Trek, and it was done entirely in Esperanto. But there was this fire, and the only known copy of it, of the film, had burned. Well, so it had been this rumored thing. Did this thing really exist? I don't remember what the name of it is. But then there's a news article that someone in Europe found a second reel of this thing, and that it wasn't, some sort of Hollywood fantasy. Like the thing actually existed.
Oh, wow.
They made a DVD of it. We got the DVD because I wanted to watch it with my Hungarian friend. and so we watched this crazy William Shatner black and white Esperanto movie that was terrible. Had a lot of beer and all kinds of stuff.
That's good. I had never heard of that before.
No, you can look it up. It's really funny. But
Mi mi răscește vere, că tu reciac von havas curits pavon.
Via aspecto estas qui bona.
Fresh pura aero revivigas min.
Via oculo estas clarai.
Dum la lastai tre noctai mi est ebre dormi, sans audi tondron.
But that then made Esperanto and this whole, like that all kind of made it stick. And it just became something in the inventory that, okay, at some point I'm going to use this.
Well, it's definitely a different take on the thing, Wolfe and other writers do, which is take real words and use them to be your sort of made up language kind of thing. But it works really well because it helps create that sense of surreal strangeness, because there's aspects of the words that seem like familiar roots, but then that go in totally different directions.
Right. Well, and you said, that you asked the question, was Wolfe influential? I'd say influential in that, when I read Wolfe, his work totally inspires me. At the same time, it's also just, reading the work of someone who's brilliant. It also can be just crushing. Where, this is beyond what I'm capable of. But the idea is, like, the fact that he used one of the conceits, I guess, for the Book of the New Sun is that it was all being translated, and for a language that would have been foreign to him, he made it Latin for us, right?
Yep.
Terminus est, so it ends up being both familiar but alien. Yeah. And it's just this fun way of approaching it. And so I think, that probably did influence my use of Esperanto, rather than to create something, a lot of people create stuff that's theirs. Mm-hmm. This all looks familiar, but what's fun is if you speak Spanish or you speak French or whatever, then you'll see this and go, oh, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I know it, but I don't quite know it, which is kind of the feel that I want you to have throughout both books.
Yeah. And it works for that exact reason super, super well. Speaking of that, then you've got these roles that are in the Between who all have Esperanto names. So maybe we can say like what the roles are, how they're different from just like fighter, wizard, thief, something like that.
Yeah. Well, and the way this came about, so I often will have ideas for stories and I'll be kind of playing around with them. And then they turn into something when I find that several of my separate ideas, if I mash them together, that's when all of a sudden I found something that I like. And so the concept of the door buried in the backyard is from something that really happened. A friend did find a door in his backyard. He called me because he was terrified that he had discovered some sort of crypt or something. And when I realized, wait, you're calling me because you want me to come over to explore it with you? Like, I am totally in. That is awesome that I'm the person that you thought of to come explore your strange crypt. It didn't turn out to be anything, but of course, like at that point, it's fuel for the imagination. Well, what if it had?
Yeah.
I had liked the idea of a dungeon crawler type story, but what would it be like? Like, what is a real way that a real person could find themselves in something that is like a dungeon crawler computer game?
Yeah.
And so where I kind of veer off from what the lit RPG world does is, I didn't want to just come up with with, oh, it's a game and just accept this and go on with the story. My goal was, well, I want it to feel as much as possible like, okay, so in this world, this could happen and it's very relatable and it doesn't just feel like a gimmick. So those two ideas got mashed together. And so in the dungeon crawler element of it, then, the ideas are, well, in those games, you almost always have some sort of character class, something like that. You have some sort of role. And then that got me thinking, well, if it's really game-like, then it's like D&D and it's, wizard or thief or whatever. But if I wanted to step a little bit away from that and make it more narrative, then almost like the roles they're not classes, they're more kind of these characters where you're stepping into a character almost like a role that you would play in a theater production rather than a video game. You're going to put a different spin on this, but a lot of the attributes they're written into the play. And so the fact that you're going to have some sort of, if you're in this role, you're going to have some conflict with these other characters, that's kind of written in, and it's going to be hard to avoid that. And in some kind of weird way, I would say the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time books have an element of this with the Taveran, all the main characters, almost like past life version. They've got these past life versions of the same thing. And so, that probably played into it a little bit. But then I just kind of came up and here, this is where revealing kind of part of the craft. For the characters that I needed in the first book, I put a lot of thought into those roles. I did list out, and the same thing about the worlds of the Between. So like if you look in the first book, you'll see there's a page from the FAQ that lists out the different roles. There's a page from the FAQ that lists out the worlds of the Between. But I didn't have all of them thought out more than a sentence or two. It was just the ones that I needed were the ones that were really thought out. And so the ones that were really needed is I wanted a kind of a shadowy kind of assassin type character. And they're all either kind of chaos or order roles. And so on the chaos side, I had the Stelesto, which is this kind of shadowy assassin. You see the Malaspero, who's this like warlord type role.
Yeah. And I will say too, you say they're chaos and order, but it doesn't necessarily break down quite into good and evil as it's chaos and order rather than good and evil is an important distinction.
Yes, no, they don't, and they don't, and and so on the order side, the Gardestaro, which is kind of like a guide character, Serchillo is like the seeker, seeking knowledge. But the thing that I wanted to do with it, I didn't want them to be good and evil. Chaos definitely has more of what you think of as evil associated with it. But I like the idea that there was a lot of interplay between them. Is that sometimes the roles would be highly adversarial, and sometimes chaos and an order role would go together really, really well. So, like the Massinisto is one of my favorite characters because it's almost like this engineer type character that's always building and constructing things. Well, that's an order character, but that character in many ways is very dark, or that role, I should say.
Yeah.
And people who inhabit that role, it tends to bring out kind of a dark side of order. And so, light, dark, good, evil. It's not as simple as that with order and chaos. That's what kept it from being boring. Also, like I would have been bored if it was just good and evil or something like that.
The one thing that I liked a lot was I don't remember if I thought that the giant creature was not a role until I saw the FAQ or not. And then when I'm trying to remember now, did you have, is it listed as a role in the FAQ in the first book? Or?
In the in the FAQ, about halfway through the first book, is when you start seeing some of the notes from Min Woo, who's one of the characters. You see, he's got this notebook of characters or just of details from the Between computer game, and you see the roles, and the roles that you're familiar with at this point are all listed as kind of minor roles.
Yeah,
there are these major roles also, and so then it prompts the questions like, well, wait a minute, can you play those also? Like, is this thing that we're encountering, was that somebody like me that is now inhabiting that thing?
Yep.
Because the big character, and this is, it's spelled like Cosmaro, but I think the correct pronunciation with Esperanto is to kind of to make it more like Koshmaro, which is the way the audio narrator does it, which kind of makes it a little alien and interesting to me. So that's this kind of big reality warping creature that is a menace.
Yeah, and seems to break the rest of the rules of the place.
Right, but it's an order character, and so it's also like understanding what does it serve? Why is it there? What is it trying to accomplish? What are, I guess, not trying to accomplish? What is it kind of compelled to do? Yeah, you see that thing, but the question is, is that something a person can play? And that's, the fun thing about having two books and more room to run, especially when you get to kind of segment them, the first half of the story, the second half of the story, is that you can ask some big questions in the first book that you're teeing up some really exciting stuff for the second book.
Yeah. And I will spoil my own opinion of this. I've told you this before, but Between was a fun book, and I strongly, of course, recommend people read it, which is why we're talking. But it pays off. I mean, you mentioned your writing workshop participant who said, I hope you can pull it off. Well, you do. And the second book does so many things that it needs the first book to set up really well, and it builds off of those. And definitely, I think, Wolfe readers like complicated stories, and the second book is complicated enough that it pretty much needs the first book to set up the stuff that's going on. But so it is very cool.
I appreciate that. I growing up, I of course loved the Star Wars movies, and everyone loves Empire, but Empire only works because of Star Wars. And so it's like, which is your favorite there? Well, I don't know. Like, you have to have them all.
You got to have them all. Exactly.
You got to have them all.
And then one other little thing, there is a tiny crossover with Colossus. Which fascinated me because I, knew Colossus really, really well from having read it, and was thinking at first that, this is just totally, different stories, different things. But there is one little moment where a character from Colossus appears in the Between, and it's brief. It goes by pretty quick, but he's there. So this is why I'm just asking sort of you, whether or not we put this in doesn't matter, but is there another story where we get a bigger crossover?
Well, I think that's a good question.
Again, I don't have to put this in the thing.
No. I think this is a good thing to include. I like this. There are, if you happen to have read Colossus and the Between, and then Garden of Before, if you read them in close proximity, you'll pick up on things kind of crossing between them. It's not major. It's like you said, there is one character that shows up across the books, but there are also some other elements. The big Colossus statue. That, like, there are a number of things, and there's also
the idea of sort of multiverses of a sort.
And particularly it's kind of the mechanisms of how things work. Is all the same kind of concepts and language, and that's all intentional, because the idea was that the Colossus story, at least parts of it, take place at the same time, like the part 2 of Colossus that it follows Esteban takes place at the same time as the Between does. it's one universe, like it's all part of the same universe.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to add a ton in it, like to force them to be one story, because they're not. But the idea is that now these are happening in the same universe. And will I write more in there? Maybe. I'm not sure. I guess. Well, okay. So the answer to that is yes, actually.
I don't know if you're going to say sales numbers.
No. Well. I mean, some of it is that. Like I think having written a sequel to The Between, sequels are a dicey thing to write, because the first book has to be popular enough.
Yeah.
Otherwise, because I've learned, and this seems intuitive and obvious, but you just kind of learn this as you go. When you write a sequel or a second book or a third book, for that matter, you don't publish, the publicity is not about that book. It's about the first one. And so, I mean, if people don't read the first one, they can't read beyond that. And so I'm fortunate that The Between has picked up pretty good readership. And so I'm excited that I've got a sequel to it. I like trying to do more original stuff. I'll probably do more one-offs. Some of them may tie in. I've got a novella that right now is on submission with some publishers that has you don't have to have read anything else of mine, but if you've read The Between, you'll recognize a couple characters from The Between are in that novella as well. And then the novella will end up having a different meaning to people who have read The Between than it would to someone who hasn't. And I think that's fun, but it's not necessary to have read the different books. But if you have, there are some treats in there for you. So I may do more stuff like that.
The other crossover you mentioned, character, the Esteban is there, but also, the name, I've forgotten the role, who their sort of MO is that they can sort of see between a few different, it's different realities. It's what Paul becomes for a while.
The Circillo?
There you go. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's the role that Paul.
Which that is like the way he's describing that is what's happening when people are on dying wish.
A little bit. It's not as it's not as crazy powerful as what Clay is experiencing. Yeah. It's a little different, but yes, and it's very intentional that I had some of those mechanisms reappear.
So I hope, folk, that has intrigued you enough to consider looking at these. They're out in audiobook. The Between is already out in audiobook and regular book, of course. And Garden of Before will be coming out in September. You said September
23rd, yes. 23rd. And the audiobook will be out, I think, that same day too. So it'll be, all formats will be out same day.
Awesome. So the reviews have all been good. People like it. There are a few I know on Goodreads, people who are like, I got confused once the game started, but that just means it's not for them. But the people who went with it all had very similar reactions that I think, which is good. It's going to satisfy that sort of Wolfian itch for complicated things where you're not quite sure what's going on. And there is a strong sense in which there is a surface story that when you finish the whole book, there is another layer to the story that you don't really see until you know the end of everything. It does that bit of a Wolfian thing too. Any other? I'm trying to remember. Is there something else that your publisher put on the book that we haven't mentioned at all?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the thing about this book that is I think it's kind of a blessing and a curse is that it crosses a lot of genres, and so I think that it has a lot of appeal to a lot of different readers. You don't need to be really into video games, for example.
Right.
If horror turns you off, it's not, there's not a ton of horror in it. I mean, it has some tense moments and it can be dark, but it's not, it's not a splatterfest novel or anything like that.
Right.
You probably are not going to have nightmares after reading it. But that also makes it a little hard to categorize. And so for me, that's one of my favorite types of stories, is that it's crossing everything. But I know that publishers hate that. Distributors hate that. And I get it. Marketing it is really tough. If you're, successful, you're Stephen King, well, then people are buying the name. But if you're trying to get readers, having nice, neat categories is helpful. And this doesn't really do that. So good thing is that I think it has broad appeal. Bad thing is it's like, how do you get it in front of you? I think one of the biggest selling points has been really the cover. Like that cover, when people see it, it stands out. And I've been very grateful to have, I think, so eye-popping.
When I shared it, when your publisher was doing a free book day, that was the one thing on Tumblr. Everybody was like, love that cover. And so I think it was the people who posted that were the ones that got it shared more often.
Well, more than anything, I just want to say thanks for having me on the podcast. This is such a smart and cool podcast. And
I definitely think not only because, we're friends, but also, and not only because I did the audiobook for Colossus, but also I do think that your stuff is exactly the kind of stuff that people who like Wolfe, the smarter genre, but also genre stuff that doesn't stay totally beholden to genre lines and really tries to try new things and do stuff. This is exactly the kind of thing that people would want to read. So,
well, I certainly hope so. And I one thing about writing that I think is probably very different than when Gene Wolfe was writing is now, because of the internet and the accessibility. It's easy to reach out and, if someone reads these and gets something out of it or has questions, that I love getting comments and questions and within reasons on the questions. If I have a good answer, I'll probably give it to you. So then I don't always, but that's a fun thing. So yeah, glad I could be on. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for talking to us. And I'll have links to everything on the show notes. And if anybody has any questions, I can pass them on to Ryan. You can find him online yourself. Yeah, but please take a look at it. The Between.
All right. Well, man, this is always a ton of fun. I can't wait for Gen Con.
I got my badge. I have my tickets.